Hello everyone, it's Mike Levin, Wednesday, July 29th, 2015. Walking to the subway to get to work in the morning, and I thought I'd say a few words about Pipulate, which is perfectly perched to surge ahead now that all this annoying underpinning infrastructure work I am now clear of. I call my little stretch of intense work over the past week or so the second coming of OAuth2. So I had used this more secure login protocol for Pipulate since it's tied to Google Docs. If you're tied to Google Docs anyway, why not use their authentication scheme, especially since they are phasing out the ability for applications to log into Google APIs with username and password credentials. It actually has to be OAuth2, meaning typically a web browser needs to pop up for a manual click, and if not already logged in, quick Google login. And then you return to your service, but now carrying a token that gives you access with certain rules to APIs as if you were that user. So you are logged in, but with a token that can expire. So that's OAuth2. And that had been implemented for the way users log in who are users of Pipulate. But that's only one of the logins involved. There's a second user account involved in Pipulate, which is the one that also needs access to the documents in order to do its scheduled jobs. So any Pipulate task can be turned into a scheduled job. If you do a quick investigation, throwing in your function names, the input URLs, you put your question marks in, and you go ahead and Pipulate, and you get a number back, and you like that, and you'd like to draw that number every day, all you need to do is replace that question mark with an asterisk, and then invite in the Gmail address of the other login. In this case, it's pipulate@gmail.com, and whoever invites in pipulate@gmail.com will have their documents auto-pipulated if it's set up correctly for scheduled tasks. Every hour or so it'll go in and see if it's an hourly task, it'll run it. If it's a daily task, it'll make sure a full day has passed by since the last run, and so on for weeks or even months. So Pipulate can be turned into a trend monitor, pulling back numbers on a scheduled basis, but it requires the web server having its own OAuth2 login, separate from the user, because we don't want Pipulate servers holding tokens that belong to that user. We are going to create as few hacking vectors as we can for Pipulate. So if a Pipulate server is compromised, you haven't lost anything except maybe needing to go into the Google developer API and set up a new project, because your client secret and your client ID, well, your client ID gets out anyway, because that's sometimes exposed in the GitHub code, but at least early on in the Pipulate project. I have since eliminated my client ID, and I've even changed the project, switching over from MikeLevinSEO@gmail.com to Pipulate@gmail.com. So all my numbers that are sort of secret are reset, but that's the most you ever risk exposing when you set up a Pipulate server and set it up for running a scheduled task. You can always just go into that API control for developers and revoke that project, and then create a new one, get a new set of numbers, and be back in business right away. So that scheduled version of Pipulate was using a hardwired username and password that I put on the hard drive. Never a good idea, because I was basically too lazy to implement OAuth2 twice in two different contexts. The one context, which is actually pretty easy for the user because you don't have to worry about storing tokens, you just get a new one next time. And in the context of the web server application. So that's the important point here. I actually implemented a case of OAuth2 login in web server application context. That means that I do store onto the hard drive something very equivalent to a username and password, but it's actually the client ID and the client secret, plus a token that I now hold, which is called the refresh token. The refresh token allows me to get new access tokens whenever I want upon request. So you see, it's a little bit more complicated because there's a bunch of more security concerns to think about, plus persistence issues and you know, checking for expired tokens if you're in a time window when you know the token is still good, that sort of stuff. And I was just too lazy to do all that OAuth2 stuff on the scheduled side on the first go around of that code, of that scheduling code. Well, Google deprecated it about a month ago, and so all my trending stuff has not been working for about a month, and I finally just bit the bullet and went in and implemented OAuth2 in both locations. So it's a big task supporting OAuth2, but it's really worth it for this class of application, and I'm glad I did it. And now that I'm clear of it, I really am going to push myself hard to get to the SEO agency algorithms. So thanks for joining me. Hope to talk